On the first day of July, I was going to have a very creative impromptu remix of the 12 Days of Christmas song, and it was going to be like really cool. But like the version that I thought of that was actually cool, I forgot it. So yeah, welcome to a very unprompted episode of A World with No End. Hi, I'm Alan. You know me by now anyways. If you don't know me, welcome to A World with No End. A podcast where I talk about absolutely nothing that makes sense, but we try to make things make sense. On today's episode, we are going to do things that I don't like being, things that make me uncomfortable, things that make me uncomfortable being, discussing my own work. So, a year ago, you will remember I made a video titled something along the lines of how I started writing poetry. And in said episode, I made an allusion to, the idea of me exploring. Ugh, it's too early for me to be mincing words like this. How I made an allusion to the idea of me exploring my own work as an individual, like my own writing, etc., etc. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do that with the first poem that I wrote that I personally feel was not absolute garbage. I mean, if I was good enough to win fourth place in a poetry competition, then it was definitely not absolute garbage. A few disclaimers that follow this poem, of course. So, one, the context of this competition was to write about, topics surrounding the 16 days of awareness for gender-based violence. So thematically, that's where I was going with it. Therefore, the poem itself does read somewhat as, you know, it hints at themes of SA, depression, things like that. Their underlying themes. I just want you to know that in case those are things that trigger you. Another disclaimer is I wrote this when I was 18. So some of the perceptions of, these topics may come off as being immature. I also wrote this poem from the perspective of um, a female. So obviously, I am not female. So yeah, take all of these things with several grains of salt. Like I wanted to write from a perspective that was not my own because I personally have never experienced gender-based violence. So yeah, I wanted to try and write from that perspective without ever having experienced it, which in hindsight was probably not the smartest idea, but from a writer's perspective, sometimes it helps to write about things that you're not familiar with to challenge yourself. But yeah, again, I have said all. Please don't hate me. Don't hate me. I I did everything I did with good intention. Right? There were good intentions in all of this. So, oh my gosh, it was 4 pages long. Oh no, it's just the font. It just has to be the font. Wait, let me put this in a font that is normal, like, and by normal I mean font style and size that are normal, that are typical of, a student or something. You know what? 2 pages now makes more sense. Yeah, yeah. So I'm just going to read it all, then we're going to like discuss. And by we I mean I am going to discuss what I was going through. Oh, side note, I had a friend who did like a video of this, She asked me for the poem and she's like, I want to do like make it a spoken word situation. I think I still have the video. I watch it sometimes to remember that someone actually really appreciated it enough to do that. Shout out to her wherever she is. Yeah. Anyways, I'm starting now. I've given enough, too many disclaimers. Don't. I whisper. My heart skips a beat and I jitter. I try silencing them, a fragile attempt of making them quiet without being too loud. I try to be the good girl, the girl I was always taught to be, but I can't. Their voices, like the rumble of a dormant volcano, overshadow mine. Their voices, like daggers, rip at my flesh, lacerate my heart. I am cold, dead, bleeding, and numb. I wave the white flag of surrender. I close my eyes. My soul deflates. I wait for death with open arms. It's all going to be okay. Trust me. We've all gone through it. You're going to be okay. My eyes should open and all I see is red. The anger consumes me. How dare they? Is the world as insane as I've painted it out to be? Don't! I shout. The blood curdling yell rips through my throat. I have been silenced too long. Don't tell me it's going to be okay. Stop saying that you know my pain. You don't. It's not you who's been beaten and bruised, humiliated, abused. You weren't dehumanized, so don't flatter me with your failed attempt at humanity. You are just as bad as the guy who raped me. His pain was physical, but your fake words of comfort caused me emotional pain. And at the end of it all, I play the victim. The perfectly submissive girl who keeps her mouth shut, waiting to be pitied. Well, to hell with it. I'm tired of having to be quiet. Enough is enough. Hashtag say no to gender based violence. What a joke, seeing as how no one ever does a damn thing about it. The Me Too movement made me so meek. It's time to stop being so weak. Stop finding comfort in numbers. We're all just a statistic. There is no comfort in knowing that I am one of billions of others facing abuse. Hashtag same WhatsApp group of misery, I guess. I'm tired of waiting for change. You see, change is not coming, not unless we make it, not unless we speak out and fight for what is right. So I am going to create change. I will not suffer quietly, and I will not let myself be a statistic. How about you? Right. See what I was going for? See wow how I was trying to tap into feminine rage that I do not have. I still don't think it's a bad poem. Good intention poem written by the wrong person. So let's do a whole analysis of it, right? Well, not a whole analysis, but like a little analysis. So the premise is you know how when conversations are had about SA and abuse against women in general, and there's that whole stereotypical notion of saying things like just say no, refuse, and so forth, right? So the use of the word don't in this context is sort of like hearkening to that effect. The whole trying to say no to an audience that does not value no as a complete sentence. Again, I will never be the one to accurately speak on this experience, but from conversations that I've had with people, a lot of people who might have experienced SA or feel very strongly about SA and any forms of abuse, when an abuser decides that they want to abuse you, it doesn't really matter how much you say no or you refuse, they're going to act on it anyways. So much so that the act of saying no or telling them to stop is almost like a whisper. It's like, yeah, it's like a whisper to, or the equivalent of shouting next to a waterfall. The waterfall is so loud that your shout is like a whisper. This person, if they've decided to harm you, they're going to harm you, and your words have no effect, which is why there's all of this imagery that I put in of, like it's so quiet, and the image of like trying to be a good girl and so forth. It's also speaking to how women are often like forced to tone police themselves. Well, let's just not even exclude it to women, but like anyone who is like within the vicinity of an abuser, you're often forced to police yourself in your mannerisms. You're trying to balance the fine line of advocating for yourself without trying to trigger their anger or their rage so that you don't get harmed in the crossfire, right? But in the process of trying to do all of that, it doesn't really matter because, again, if a person has decided that they want to harm you in any way, rarely is any external force, or not even external force in this context, rarely does your will, your desire factor into the conversation. They don't care what you want, it's what they want. That is their prerogative. So that is why I was creating this very, you know, dark image of, well, you're trying to refuse, but you can't really refuse because, again, it's like shouting next to a waterfall. This person has decided that they're going to hurt you, or this population of people who are abusers have decided that they're going to abuse their victims. It's next to impossible, if you're a singular entity, to try and stand against them, which is why the persona in this poem gets to the point of waving their white flag of surrender. That moment of almost accepting your abuse for what it is, and sadly, in some instances, people do end up accepting their abuse for what it is to their own detriment, and they go through life like that, right? Then there are those words, the whole, it's going to be okay, trust me, we've gone through it before, you're going to be okay. These are sort of like the voices of other people who have been abused, right? And are probably still within that abusive situation, trying to console the persona in this particular poem. And it is upon hearing those words that the persona sort of like snaps out of their, you know, I am surrendering mindset, and they get mad again, revitalized anger, sort of like, why am I accepting this situation? Which again is, I think, a moment that some people who are being abused get to, like, the people who then actively try to defy their abuser, whether it ends in tragedy or it ends with them freeing themselves from their abuser, when they start actively trying to fight the abuser, there's always that one triggering event. Like, so many things may happen, but there's always that one triggering event that eventually gets to you and just like, okay, but why? Right? That is what I was going for in this situation. So the whole questioning of, how dare you tell me that it's going to be okay? How can you tell me that? Like, are you insane? Do you not see my suffering? Why are you trying to undermine what I'm going through? Type of situation, right? So, yeah, I wrote this from the perspective of someone who had been recently sexually assaulted. Am I allowed to say that on YouTube? Anyways, that's the perspective that I wrote it from, right? again, I had never been SA'd, but I was trying to tap into what kind of feelings would that invoke. And yeah, I then wrote it in a rather optimistic light of a person who then sees fault in how these issues are handled. So I guess the fault would be, right, in that there is still so much um stigma the right word, like regardless of all the strides that have been made to address gender-based violence, SA, all those, issues, in regardless of how much effort has been put to put those issues to light and to make them morally reprehensible, to be seen as morally reprehensible and also legally reprehensible within society. There's still so many people who don't see a problem with all of that behavior and don't take it seriously enough. So when certain things happen, right? Like, for example, the Me Too movement. I've heard so many criticisms of the Me Too movement. I don't remember all of the details of the Me Too movement, though, right? But there were so many people who said, okay, fine, you said Me Too, but what next? Like the active steps of afterwards. What happens after the social media campaign? We have this traction. What next? What are we doing to address the problem further? How are we going to police these individuals who have been convicted of sexual assault or alleged to have committed these heinous, horrible crimes, right? There's always the problem of, even if it gains traction, rarely do these movements then have a concrete action plan of how they're going to proceed. Not to say that they aren't places where they have action plans and they have a way of proceeding, but I wrote this again from that point of understanding when I was 18 that, they aren't then action plans afterwards. And what is important thereafter is, once you gain traction, once you have support of people, you sit down there then and talk about, how do we proceed? We have been impacted XYZ. How do you approach and lobby ourselves before legislature so that they can take this more seriously? How do you re-educate the police force? And all of those things are the things that then need to happen, that people seem to forget about, because again, at some point, social media movements do die down. And once the movement on social media has died down, will it have affected any substantial change type of situation? In the end, the persona refuses the idea of being a statistic and wants to implement change. The question still remains, how does this change then come about? Yeah. So that was what I wrote way back when. And yeah, I still don't think it's a terrible poem. I still think it was well intentioned. But like, I don't know, the me that I am now reads this and is like, okay, I know what you were trying to do, sir, but really? Really? Yeah. Anyways, again, please don't hate me. Do not hate me. If you're one of those people who feel super strongly about certain subject matter. And yeah, please don't hate me. I'm sorry. But yeah, I hope you can appreciate the poem that I wrote as my younger self was really getting into poetry at the time. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you if you have listened this far. You have incredible patience if you can listen this far. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.